I'm able to provide for a family or to do, whatever I want to do in 5, 10 years. And so I think it's helped me a lot being logical and being, I'm going to have to do these things for the next year, 2 years, and I might not love it, but I know that in 2 years, I'm going to be thanking myself that I took the steps that I did. Doing pretty good. How are you?
I am doing well. I'm actually very excited to get you onto our platform and have this call because you happen to be my niece. And it's not often I get to extend this invitation to family members, but obviously I'm a little bit biased when it comes to this conversation, but I think you're an incredible human being. I think you have done so much already in your life. And we really just kind of want to pull back the curtain because part of the focus of habitual growth is really helping individuals like yourself and potentially a little bit younger find a path that leads them to success and happiness, but also complete fulfillment. And I know you've had, I don't want to say a rocky road, but you've had challenges. You've really faced a lot of adversity in the last couple of years. And I'm incredibly proud of what you've been able to do. I get to share that with people all the time. But we're going to start pulling some of this back. We're going to pull on a couple of threads and just hear it from you of just all the things that you are doing at your age that's kind of led you to the place that you're currently at today. So with that long narrative and introduction, who are you, Madeline? What are you doing today? And kind of how did you get to this place?
Okay. Hi everybody. My name is Madeline. I'm currently going to be an incoming junior here at University of Kansas. I'm studying chemical engineering, and I'm currently working for a law firm as a technical specialist intern. I'm 20 years old, so I'm pretty young, so I'm super excited to get this message out to some younger people because, I think it's a really good platform that you guys have, but I think it is good to sort of reach out to the younger crowd. I think they need a little more, some guidance.
They need guidance. Adults need guidance. Adults, I mean, you're 20, you are an adult, but older adults also need more guidance as well. Let's talk about the internship, just kind of starting out. You're interning. This is your first year working at a law firm, but it's a big internship. So you're in Minneapolis, you took this on, but what did it take to open up that door? What did you do? Because I know my understanding is there are very few people that actually were accepted for this internship. A lot of people applied. So how did you stand out? Like, how did you get that door open and be able to walk through it?
Mhm. Yeah, I think to start off with, I am studying chemical engineering, like I had mentioned, but I wasn't super set on the idea of working in the engineering industry. I wasn't super convinced on working on one project all summer. I kind of wanted to explore some other options. And so somehow I had found this loophole of kind of technical specialist, patent agent role. And so I saw this opening and kind of went through the steps in the process. The interview process was pretty extensive. It took me probably about 4 or 5 months to finally hear my offer letter. I think the biggest thing for me during the whole experience is perseverance and just kind of continuing to reach out to people if I haven't heard anything, kind of poke back in, remind them that I'm extremely interested. And I think a lot of the experiences I had going into it helped me a lot as well. I had some undergraduate research experience. I recently studied abroad, so I think that set me apart from a lot of the different candidates as well. And just kind of how I held myself. I know that I was really young and coming into the role, but I also knew that I had a lot to learn and a lot to give to the company. So I made that very apparent when I was going through the interview process. And yeah, I just asked a lot of really good questions and it ultimately led me to where I am right now.
That's awesome. And let's talk about that responsiveness because I think that's something a lot of younger people um, just lack in general. And you're a very self-aware individual, which I respect a lot. I think that's incredible. But that hasn't come naturally, right? You've had to do certain things over time. I know you were a big proponent of, I don't want to walk out of college with a lot of debt. So you going into it applied to a ton of scholarships. Do you think that really helped kind of pave the way and lead you to being able to make sure you were following up and asking the right questions and working on interview skills and all that type of stuff? Kind of where do you trace that back to starting to build some of the skill sets that it took you to get there?
Yeah, I think ultimately when I was first going to college, I really took a step back and kind of realized, this is really expensive. How can I minimize this cost? And I think a lot of younger people in this generation kind of see no or no response as a no, but I think at some point, I had to take a step back and realize like if this is something I really want, like I need to continue to pursue this and whatever aspect that was in my life. I ended up getting a really good scholarship for some housing stuff for this upcoming year, and so that took a lot of work. That took a lot of bugging people, but I knew that it was something I financially needed as well as just wanted for myself. And I think this is also kind of one of those areas where I was very persistent because I knew that it was something that was going to help my career down the line. It was something that I was very like passionate about. And so I think yeah, I just think that a lot of people just need to not see even no as an answer. I mean, you can always follow up and say, I appreciate the feedback. Is there something that there's available in the future? Kind of something like that. Or even if there's no answer, I think that's almost more of a room for you to bug again to remind people that you're there. And I think that's something that the younger generation definitely lacks is
Yeah.
following up with companies and even scholarship people or whatever they're trying to obtain or apply for. So yeah.
That's awesome. No, I love that. And it's funny you say that, no doesn't always mean no. I'm going through a scenario now. As I also make CBD beverages, and I had a supplier that responded with, "Hey, we can only do this," and they sent me a small sample, and it wasn't even enough for me to do anything with. And I spent a month trying to find out other avenues, how to do certain things, because their MOQ, their minimum order it was thousands of dollars. It was way more than I was willing to spend. And I just ended up calling the guy up and I just said, "Hey, listen, like, I know you told me this, but is there any way we can work out a deal? Let's talk this through. Here's what I'm trying to accomplish." And that really started to change perspective. He actually did it. So I actually ended up getting the ingredients that I needed, but it was the no doesn't mean no. It was the no means maybe try a little bit harder. And it sounds like that's what you're finding a lot as well.
Right. Yeah. And I think a lot of that comes from varying perspectives, right? Like, I think, no could mean a different thing for somebody, and then it could be a different thing for you. So I think switching the perspective and bringing something new to the table, bringing something, new to light to the situation definitely helps, especially if you're, looking for like a new job or you're an applicant and vice versa. I think it's good if people switch it a little bit to where you're able to come to sort of like a middle ground.
Mhm. Yeah.
So I
Do you think when you're negotiating with people or you're reaching back out to them, you're trying to share additional information and you're trying to find that connective tissue to say, "Hey, I know you told me this, but let's think about this over here. This is what it's going to do to me. So this benefits you in this capacity." Or are you just continuously following up and saying, "I really want this"? Because obviously there's a big difference between that, right?
Right. I think I've definitely experienced both of those. When I was pursuing this position back in September, I think it was more so just following up, reminding them that I was there. However, now that I'm in the role and I find myself working on specific projects with people, I ultimately day to day am having conversations of, okay, well, you know, this person wants to go this route on this, project, but I think that we should go this route, or I can kind of see where they're going and coming from, but I think we should also, bring to light this sort of aspect. And so I think having done that this summer and having learned that, I think it actually helps build those connections with a lot of different people because they realize that you're willing to see a different perspective, but ultimately also validate and respect their opinion and their, what they're trying to bring to the table on the project as well.
Yeah, that's great. That's awesome. That's really cool. Let's go back to what you had mentioned a little bit earlier when you studied abroad. Where did you go? When did that happen? How long are you gone for?
So I was studying abroad in England, Birmingham. So I was there beginning of September of 24 to the end of December in 24. So I was there just over, say, 3, 4 months ish. I ended up going alone. I ended up actually applying the day before the deadline. It was like a whim of a decision. It was something I had wanted to do. And finally I pulled the trigger and I was like, nope, I'm going to figure this out and I'm going to go. Yeah, so it was honestly one of the best experiences of my life. I think it ultimately pushed me into this role because I had a lot more confidence built up in myself that I had learned from my study abroad experience, kind of jumping into things without knowing too much, but knowing that I ultimately would be able to handle it. So I
Hmm.
think it was a good push for me to strive in this career jump for the summer.
I'm going to, use the word perseverance, but I'm going to persevere through it. I know I'll be fine and get to the other side. What did that look like mentally for you?
Yeah, I think I was kind of in the group of a lot of your friends in college. I toyed around with the idea. I'm in a sorority, so I'd seen a lot of my sorority sisters go abroad and kind of going with some other sisters, and it looked like they were having like a super fun, awesome time. I think for me, I just kind of hit my breaking point, and I knew that this was something I needed to do now or never. It was either going to happen or it wasn't going to happen in my lifetime. And I knew I would have regretted the decision more if I hadn't gone and figured it out and taken the summer class that I took this summer versus not going and then regretting that for the rest of my life, because I don't know if I'll ever be able to get the experiences that I had gotten when I had went. And so I kind of outweighed the pros and the cons, and I just knew that I needed to do it because I knew I wouldn't regret going. I would have regretted not going. And so I
Okay.
think that was my biggest push to jump in and apply and to ultimately figure it out when I had to figure it out. Because, right, I didn't need to figure it out right then and there. I just knew if I applied and I got in, then that was it. And I would figure everything out as I went.
Yeah.
And I think I definitely, as the deadline, or not the deadline, but as the date for me to leave was approaching, I definitely was very scared, very anxious. I remember talking to my mom being like, I don't know if I should do this. I don't know anybody. I'm going by myself. I'm flying and all of this and that. And I think ultimately it came down to the fact that I was really scared to do it, but at the same time, you can be scared and be brave. And so it was one of those, I'm really scared and I'm really nervous, but I also know that I'm very brave and I can do this. And so I think it was just a lot of, reminding myself that I am capable.
Yep.
And if I have questions, that somebody, some way, I could ask. Like, I wasn't ultimately alone. It felt like I was, but I wasn't. And so I think just reminding myself that there are people that are wanting to help, and there's always somebody that could answer a question. That was really helpful.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's really awesome. And you did something which I wanted to touch on because I think it is incredible. You started calling people. You're like, hey, I'm thinking about this. Should I actually do this? I believe I was one of the people that encouraged you to go. I know there was a handful of others. Did you find anybody that actually told you, no, probably don't go, not worth your time right now? Did anybody tell you no?
No, nobody told me no. And in fact, if somebody I had talked to didn't do it, they had mentioned that it was one of the biggest regrets of their life that they didn't do it. And so I think kind of hearing that story and how, they progressed to the point of their life where they have kids now, they're grown, they're mid 40s, early 50s, and that time has now passed. I think what really resonated and settled with me, like, okay, if I want to do this, it's now or never. And so that was a big push for me.
Yeah, no, it's really important to open up your eyes because you get that perspective, which, by the way, I have a book for you to read, which I'm sure your mom has already given to you, but we do need to get you to read this book here in a little bit. But I find that incredible. And the other thing that you said, which is really, really impressive, Madeline, as you said, I'm just going to apply, right? I'm going to take the first step. I'm going to do one thing to get me a little bit closer because it's really important to you. And that actually reminds me when you actually called me earlier in your college career as well. And you said, hey, I'm thinking about changing professions. I don't want to be this degree over here. I want to go over here. What are your thoughts on that? So you changed from, was it mechanical or electrical to chemical?
Mechanical. Yep, I was mechanical.
Okay. Now, normally I would say, well, what led to that decision? But I kind of already know what that was for you. But what I think is more impressive and really the thread I want to pull on here is what made you comfortable and okay with changing majors and not really questioning it, but just saying like, hey, this isn't working for me. I feel comfortable. I need to get out and do something that I'm a little bit more, I don't even say passionate about because I know you weren't passionate about chemical engineering. So what led to that transition? Because a lot more people go through a a degree change in university or college than we probably anticipate. They just never really talk about the reasons why. So what was that for you?
Yeah, that for me is sort of a loaded question. I made the jump from mechanical because I felt like it was really broad in the sense that I could go through with it. I knew I was capable of doing it, but there wasn't a super clear pathway when I was done because it is so broad. And so yeah, it was just some of the classes I was taking as well. It just wasn't for me. Like, I really enjoyed the engineering part of it, but the mechanical engineering specific classes were not something I was super interested in. And then I knew some people that I'd switched to chemical and sort of the different pathways that opened in core instead of, mechanical, right? Because their chemical is also broad, but it opens different paths. And so that to me was more interesting than going down mechanical. And I wasn't super set on doing chemical, but I knew that there was an end goal and I could get to where I wanted to be in chemical engineering. And I think that ultimately led me to the switch that I took.
Okay.
Yeah, I think when I had made the switch, it was kind of, I was pretty set on, okay, now I'm more confident in this. And I was taking a few different classes now at this point last spring, and it resonated with me a bit more. I was more interested in the courses and the chemistry. So it felt like a good switch automatically. I haven't had any regrets otherwise or thoughts of switching into another one. So I think ultimately it ended up being a good switch for me. But I think if I were to ever have a change of heart or a change of mind, that opportunity would be there for me to switch again if I wanted to.
Okay. Yeah, that's the reason I asked that question is I went through the same thing. I'm not going to get into my university journey because it wasn't dissimilar, but I did it for different reasons. But you mentioned the word goal. I had a goal at the end, which was basically like I wanted a degree that basically makes a lot of money at the end of the day. Even if I don't like the degree, even if I don't like the job, I will have a job that can financially support me. And that fortunately worked out very well in my favor. I think a lot of people go in and they may not think as strategically. It's just like, I fall in love with this passion of mine. Not to say that there's anything wrong with that, but it leads to different challenges in life. And so as you're working through all of this, how do you feel like your growth and maybe your decision making or strategies have set you apart from your peers? Because I'm assuming not everybody is as put together as you. And that's not a negative towards anybody else, but you're very methodical, you're very logical, you follow a system. How has that really helped you in your college career so far?
Yeah, I think like you mentioned, even I have some friends at school that where they're studying something and it's sort of they love it and they do it because they love it. And that might bring challenges, post grad or wherever that might bring them. And so I think it's hard now with this generation because I think a lot of people are pushed to do what they love, but I think that there's a difference between that. And so that's kind of where I stood apart for some people is because I knew that I might not have loved engineering, but I knew that it would put me in a good spot to be able to financially provide for the things that I do love to do. And so I think there's a very distinct difference between, those two types of people.
Mhm.
Not needless to say, one is right and one is wrong. But I think just knowing that it has helped me a lot, in my classes is sort of like I know this might not be my favorite class at the moment. I know that the next semester might be super hard, but I know that ultimately in 16 weeks it's over and I'm one step closer to graduating, and going into a career that's going to be able to financially support me, financially support like my traveling and seeing my family and
Mhm.
doing all these experiences, which is what I want most out of life. I ultimately don't want to be working my life away, right? That's not the end goal for me. So the end goal is to, be in a career where it provides for me and I'm able to provide for a family or to do, whatever I want to do in 5, 10 years. And so I think it's helped me a lot being logical and being able to think, I'm gonna have to do these things for the next year, 2 years, and I might not love it, but I know that in 2 years I'm gonna be thanking myself that I took the steps that I did.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think that's incredible. As you know, I don't do anything that has to do with my major anymore, and I haven't for probably 15 years. But I, laid a very, very solid foundation that allowed me to do certain things early on that helped me get into the position where my wife and I can do certain things that we wouldn't have been able to do had we just followed our passions. And so,
Right.
I'm a big believer of what's the strategy, what's the goal behind it. For you, you're talking about 5, 10 years down the line. You're talking about, traveling and building a family and making sure you're financially secure, all that good stuff. How far, like, do you have a 5 year goal? Do you have a 10 year goal? Are you thinking that far in advance, or are you more focused on the 2 to 3 years in front of you right now?
Mhm. Yes and no. I think I have short term and long term goals. I see myself in 2 years graduating with chemical engineering. I always joke with my current boyfriend Sam that in 2 years I'm gonna get my degree and I'm gonna, walk down. And I've always told him like I'm gonna graduate in red bottoms. So that's my short term goal is like I'm gonna get my degree and I'm gonna graduate my red bottoms. And then ideally, within 5 years, I would love to go to law school and I would love to pursue that. And so I think sort of a long term goal for me is I would love to become a lawyer by the time I'm 26, 27, and
Okay.
put myself in a position where, I'm in the legal world officially as an attorney. And so I think I have short-term and I have long-term goals. So those are the two that I'm sort of striving for right now. But I'm sure more will come along the line. But
Do you think, you know, the skill sets that you've been able to build, your perspective, your goal setting, initiative of proactively going out and grabbing scholarships and being okay taking the short-term perspective, how was that led by the people that you're surrounded with? Do you feel like it was influenced a lot, a little? And then if it was a lot or even a little, who are those instrumental people in your life?
I think this is actually a really interesting question because when I had first gone into college, I was just talking about this the other day. If I had met the person I was going into college, and if that person met me now, I don't think they would be the same person. I think that when I had arrived in college, I was surrounded by very different kinds of people, people that were very interested in partying, going out. They weren't super concerned about the whole school aspect of things. And it took me probably, half a year, almost to a year to realize that if I keep surrounding myself with these sort of people and they want to go out on Tuesdays and Wednesdays and maybe not only the weekends, it's going to lead me to fall behind in school and ultimately fall behind on my goals. And so I really had to take a step back, and I actually ended up stop being friends with some of those people because I knew that if I continued being friends with them, that they were showing me behaviors that they thought were okay but were ultimately hurting my goals. And they didn't need to know that, but it was sort of like an internal thing for me. And so I kind of regrouped. When I'd come back abroad, I really kind of reflected on, okay, is this person going to be really beneficial for me and my goals, or is it somebody that's going to set me back and it's going to affect me negatively? And so I kind of had a moment and some time just to reflect and analyze on sort of that. So I have a new friend group now going back into college as a junior that I love all of them. They're very goal oriented, very logical. A lot of them are pre med going to med school, studying for the MCAT shortly. One of them, she is super driven in business and manufacturing. And so she does a lot of like super cool things with our business school. And so I think when you surround people that have similar ideas and similar goals, you find yourself growing exponentially versus when you're with a group of people that you might stick out and you're kind of the black sheep of the group, you'll feel more isolated and you'll feel like you feel like you don't fit in, and ultimately that's going to hurt your mental health. And so I think when you find that group of people that you really connect with on that goal setting level, and maybe they don't need to know that, but maybe you know that, right? I think the change in your mental health is astonishing. I mean, really it is.
I would wholeheartedly agree with that. And I actually went through, geez, probably about three different friend groups by the time I hit my junior year. The group that I was friends with my entire freshman year and half of sophomore year, we kind of had a falling out. We just separated. It's like no bad blood, but just like, didn't see eye to eye. And that transition was really hard. I found a completely new friend group and had a different perspective of my same thing, my junior year, senior year, because as you mature, as you get more experiences when you're on your own, that brings a lot of perspective to your life. Like you said, I think a lot of people go into college and they have an idea of one thing, what's responsibility. Oops, nobody's taking care of me. Oops, nobody cares if I actually show up to class because they're getting paid anyways, so I better make the most of it. So you start to really drive accountability. When you took a pause and you said, hey, I really need to maybe rethink my friend group, did that happen when you were studying abroad, or was it kind of gradual and that was just the end of the line for the current friend group because you're like, hey, I'm falling behind? Or no, I actually met people that I'm much more aligned with on this trip?
It definitely happened when I had come back, sort of, the friends that I had made abroad and the experiences that I had. I'd say before I went abroad, I was not scared to be myself in a sense when I was at school, but I was a math major when I was abroad. And so I had met these wonderful, wonderful group of women, and we were all super intelligent. And I had shared a lot of super cool experience with them. And when I was with them, it felt like, I could talk about whatever I wanted to talk about, and nobody would look at me like I was the black sheep. And nobody would question a thing that I had said, if it was about school or if it was about something else. And so it really started to make me reflect and think about, if I thought to have these conversations with the friends I have back home, would I feel the same? And the answer was no. And so it really took some time, and it was really hard to, make that step for myself. But I knew that if I hadn't had that experience that I had abroad and that sort of family feeling with the friends that I had made, then I wouldn't have decided to make the step that I did.
express my opinion. People are going to respect me. They may, even if they don't get along with me, or maybe they don't agree with me, they at least respect me enough to have a conversation. And it's not an embarrassment. It's not a fight. It's not any of that type of stuff. But, when you were growing up through high school, so let's just take like the last 4 years. So maybe the last time from 16 to 20, okay, your last 2 years of high school, how instrumental was your parental relationships, like kind of guiding you along the way? Like, did you feel like you were getting shoved in a certain direction? You have to go to college, you have to apply for these things, or was it Madeline can do whatever she wants and we're just going to support her along this journey?
I think, yeah. I mean, I think that, both of my parents really pushed and was like, you're going to go to college and you're going to do this. But it was kind of looked at the fact of like, okay, if you're going to go, then we'll support you in whatever you want to study. My dad really wanted me to study something that was going to set me up financially. My mom didn't really have too much say about that. And so I kind of got two different pulls. And so I kind of had to figure it out for myself of like, okay, what do I really want to do? And what does that look like for me? So I would say I definitely had a little parental guidance pushing me, out of high school into college, but it wasn't, you need to study this and you're going to end up and, you're going to be a pharmacist like the both of us. That was never the case, but it was sort of a, you are going to go to college though. Yeah.
Okay. Do you feel like you were pushed in, not in a direction of a career or even after college, but you had a job early on in high school as well, if I remember correctly, right? So did you get pushed in that direction where it was like, no, Madeline, you need to start, getting out into the real world, getting some experience, building a resume? I'm not sure if that conversation came up, but what did that look like maybe your last 2 years in high school before you made the transition to college?
Yeah, so I had the same job for junior, senior, and even my freshman summer coming home. I worked in a hair salon, absolutely loved it. I loved the people that I worked with, but I knew that it was something I didn't want to do for the rest of my life. And so I think having both my parents know that there wasn't necessarily like a push of like, okay, now that you've, worked this job for 2.5 years, this is what you're going to do. But I do think that it was good experience and good exposure because when I was doing my switch from mechanical to chemical, I had actually loved working the salon so much that that was one of the reasons I had switched because I knew that if I ended up getting my chemical engineering degree that I could make hair products and make makeup products and go down, the beauty aspect of the STEM industry. And so even though that job didn't push me to go straight into the workforce, it definitely sort of influenced part of my decision to switch.
Okay. I love that. That's so cool.
Uh,
I want to ask two more questions, and then I'm going to
okay.
turn it over to you to ask questions or share anything else that you would like. First question, from your perspective, this is just Madeline's opinion and your current experience so far. What are maybe the top three things that young adults your age, or even maybe a little bit younger, so those that are looking, 17 to 18 or 20, like transitioning into the college and finding their authentic selves and really growing their networks. What are the top three things that you would recommend they focus on or that they should know at this time to really help set themselves apart and really bring out their true personalities and direction in life?
Mhm. Yeah, I think looking back, I've mentioned this with some of my college friends, but I was kind of the black sheep in high school. I was pretty nerdy. I stuck to myself, but it ultimately led me to not being my full self because I was kind of scared. I feel like a lot of people in high school nowadays feel like they can't be themselves. They can't, pursue their education like they want to in high school because they're worried that people are going to make fun of them or, they're going to be left out or this or that. And so I really wish that I knew in high school that it was super important to embrace that and to continue down my education and to continue in the things that I was really passionate about
Mhm.
because it would lead me to where I am now. But even I could have been even farther, right? Like if I had pursued my passion of math when I was high school, I could be farther down the line, right? And so I think not necessarily like that being a regret of mine, but I think that is something that, high schoolers should be aware of that you shouldn't ever feel like you should be somebody you're not just because it's the cool thing to do and the popular thing to do. That's definitely one of my advice. I think the other advice is like we had sort of talked about earlier, no doesn't always mean no. I think if, you're really passionate about something or you see something that you really want, even if, you're young, and even if an adult tells you, that's crazy, that's just a dream, it's not always a dream, right? And I think dreams actually don't exist because I think a lot of, what we perceive mentally can actually have a big effect on how we go after that. And so I don't ever actually, we talk about long term goals, it's a goal, it's not a dream because I know it's someday that's going to happen. And so I think that's really important for people to know. And I think ultimately the last thing that people should know is if you have a question, ask somebody, because nobody's ever going to look at you like you're dumb for asking a question ever. And I wish that was something that I had known when I was younger.
Yep, I would wholeheartedly agree with all of those. I can recall many, many times, even in college, where I just wish I would have actually been a little bit closer with my professors.
Mhm.
Ask deeper questions, try to build relationships a little bit early on. And it's a life journey, right? There's no right or wrong for the most part, unless people are doing bad things and crimes and all that good stuff. But for the most part, there is no wrong journey. And it really is about when people start to wake up and they find out their authentic selves, and perspective changes, experience changes, relationships change, and everything is really temporary for the most part. Now, on the other side, the last question for you, people my age, maybe a little bit older, those that are trying to work with a younger generation such as yourself, those that maybe have kids in high school or have nieces and nephews, whatever it is, what would you share with them to help guide young adults that are transitioning into this part of their life?
Yeah, I think that this is a really good question. I actually have a very strong opinion about this because I think that there is a really big divide between your generation and my generation, right? I think your generation was raised upon, you're going to go to college and this is the way you're going to go and that's how it's going to be. And I think my generation is sort of, I don't want to say lollygagging their way through life, but I think it's kind of like, oh, wherever the wind takes me, wherever, I'm not really thinking about the future. And so I think, in my opinion, a lot of, if someone is a parent or an adult of someone in high school, I think my biggest advice is to leave, that relationship with that individual very open and create a safe space for, the child or the niece or the nephew to ask questions, but for them to know that if they ask certain questions that, there's not going to be, consequences or any sort of things like that. And I think there should almost be sort of like a mentorship versus I'm the parent and you're the child. So whatever I say goes and whatever you say, you listen, sort of a thing. And so I think providing good experiences and just sort of, no, I wouldn't say necessarily tell them what to do, but I would say like guidance in a way. And I think it's also really important for that individual to know how their child is, right? Because it's like you could have a child that's nothing like you. So if you're going to push them in a way that you would have wanted to be pushed, it's not going to work. And they're going to push back and they're probably going to run farther away than they were, the other way. And so I think it's really important to just create an environment where there's trust and sort of a mentorship that goes along with that.
So, just reiterating the question again, I really just wanted to know for people that are peers, nephews, family members, whatever it is, of younger adults, younger generations, what advice would you give to them to really help kind of usher in the next transitionary period for people, really directing them for young adults, getting them to maybe just a better level of achievement, success, and direction without becoming overly bearing on, this is what I think you should do and this is my opinion and you have to follow my rules?
Mhm. Yeah, I think, like I was saying before the recording cut off, I think ultimately it is really important to know the child that you're talking to, because I think if, they're not anything like you, like if you're a parent and you have a child that's nothing like you, I think pushing them in the same way that you wish you would have been pushed is actually probably going to be more of a negative experience for them and more of a pushback than to be helpful. And so I think for starters, I think it's really important to like know your child and know sort of their strong suits and their personality and their characteristic. And then I think from there, I think just providing them with experiences, answering any questions that they may have, creating a safe environment where they feel like they can come to you and they can ask the questions that they need to ask. And I think ultimately there should be no judgment, because I think somebody's route through life may not be yours, and neither right and neither wrong. And so I think facilitating the fact that it's okay to be different is really important as well in the younger generation.
Yeah, I love that. I think that's so good. And yes, I mean, that is a lesson most people learn later on in life, which is just everybody's life is their own. You can't control people. You can't control the direction. You just are who you are. And the more people live authentically, actually, the stronger the relationships are. And it goes back to even what you had said, just about transitioning friends groups. That's why people get along with certain people over other people, is because you have a similar direction at the right time in life that brings you closer together, and those bonds grow over time. You get deeper into those relationships, and ultimately that helps dictating a lot of where your life goes. So I know we're getting kind of close to time, but this has been awesome, Madeline. It's so great to connect with you. Thank you so much for sharing. Is there anything else you want to share with the audience? Any of the listeners, any of the younger generations that we haven't talked about today?
I don't think so necessarily. I think just my biggest message for the young generation is to take that chance, take that, the little sliver of you that really wants to do something but is really scared. I think that they should take that jump because you never know what opportunities that might open for you. And I think the regret of not doing something is going to outweigh, any negativity that may come from doing that jump. So I think that would be my biggest takeaway, kind of what we have talked about here today.
Awesome. That leads me to one more question then. What were the three biggest decisions you have made in the last, let's say, 3 years, 2 to 3 years, that have made you become the more confident, more experienced, better professional Madeline that you are today?
I think my biggest experience so far has been studying abroad by myself. I think that has led a lot of opportunities, has led for me to feel more confident in myself. I think the second thing is the career swing that I have made. Although I'm still in engineering and still in the technical space, I am facing more of a legal outlook on a career. And so I think that has been really great for me as well. But it was a really hard decision to make, right? Because I'm taking all these engineering classes and, it might not correlate exactly to, the legal set that I'm currently in, but you learn a lot of skills in engineering and you learn how to work through things. And so I think that was a very valuable thing for me to learn as I've gone through the swing. The other thing that I have learned is it's most important to be yourself, even if that means you lose people along the way. Because if you lose people along the way and you are truly being yourself, then those people were never meant for you. And I think that is a lesson that I wish I had learned long before I had learned it. And losing people doesn't necessarily mean that it's a bad thing for you or for them. Things happen and vice versa. But I think, if you lose people along the way and you're not aligned on certain things, that it's never a setback for you. It's actually opening a door. And I don't think a lot of people realize that.
That's so good. And ironically, Madeline, I'm going to read you the quote that I just sent to your mom right before we jumped on, which was, "No need to cut people off, just grow and they will fall off." And that's something that I sensed because it really resonated with me. It was reflective of our conversation that we had earlier this morning. But it's just it's a fact of life. When you grow and other people don't, it feels like this massive separation. And again, there's nothing wrong with it. But when you pursue that authentic self, you chase your dreams, you aren't lazy, you stay motivated, you stay inspirational, you continuously want to grow, naturally those relationships will evolve. So all that to say, thank you again so much for being here. I love all of this. This is going to be so amazing to get out there and just see the impact that it really has. Where can people find you if you want people to find you at all on the socials?
I'm honestly not too active on social media. I choose to sort of take a step back in that respect. But if people are really interested, I am on LinkedIn as well as Instagram. And those are the two platforms that I am a part of. So, yeah.
Awesome. And we'll tag you in there on those platforms then. All right.
Okay.
But it was so great to talk to you, Madeline. And we will get this out and I'll tag you in everything when it goes live. So thank you.